example, there's another condition called OCPD, um, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And these people tend to be workaholics, stingy, perfectionistic, and in some ways they have some shared characteristics with narcissistic personality disorder people. So, but when you read the OCPD, you tend to be a little bit more sympathetic somewhere. You know, so until someone is actually diagnosed and it's accurately being monitored and so on by a professional, it's I think it's a bit risky to sort of rubber stamp one and say they are one of those, because then you get this mentality of us and them, and you make a kind of object of them and a stereotype of them. And that kind of black and white thinking is not ever going to really help anyone in the process. So when you get that kind of knowledge and you dwell on it, you tend also to get caught in a spiral of thinking about the past and believing that sort of focusing on the past and the family dynamics and the family people is what's going to work, is what's going to help. And that's not necessarily true, particularly if you're doing it on your own. You haven't got a qualified therapist you're working with. I'm only saying that because psychodynamic and Freudian, Anna-Freudian or original Freudian psychotherapy is a lot about childhood. So the assumption is that that's what therapy is going to do. It's like who I was, which also mindfulness doesn't do, by the way. Is all going in and tell me about your brother and your sister and when your father and you and then and that. It's all going into all that old stuff. That's a distinct contrast to another form of therapy called solution focused. And solution focused, you don't do any of that. There's the bare minimum of thinking or talking or focusing on the past. You're focusing on what's working right now. It's nothing to do with that stuff. It's not chewing over and mulling over and digging up and getting into heavy emotions like guilt and all that. And well, if I suppose, sexual stuff or, but digging and probing and all that. But you're focusing on, what's working and what progress is going on so far. So it's much more constructive. It's much briefer as well, because once you start getting into psychotherapy, it's kind of a never-ending story. And you often find that people, who've been in that are kind of a bit shaky. They never seem to be sort of closure, because there's a never-ending amount of it, right? Memories and all that. So you're really talking about a very simple, brief, and only concentrating on these sort of solutions and what's working. You're not talking about the problem. You're not talking about the past. You're not thinking about that. So that's called brief solution focused brief therapy, which I just personally noticed when I contacted that kind of therapist one time. Their first thing was, well, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve out of this? And I was like, I thought I was going to lay on a couch and talk about my childhood, really deeply relaxed. You want me to do some work? And they do. They want you to do some work on those questions. And you have to think, So that's all kind of future. There's a big difference between focusing on the past and focusing on the future, and in a kind of short-term, concrete goals. It's really like, how are you going to know? How are you going to know it's happened? How are you know that the problem's finished now? What are you going to see? What's the actual difference? And can you do it this week? It's kind of like, wow. It's a different thing. It's not allowing you to sort of wallow and get in your story and all about, and this, but that's not everyone wants that. Everyone, many people want to talk about their story, and they kind of expect
more my kind of thing, actually. The solution based, that kind of.
I mean, if you even hear about it, you're like, I get it. And if you're caught in a kind of lockdown, frozen up situation, that's very complicated, and it's in that kind of zone that I was talking about, his mother, my father, he's there when I was when I was a kid, my father, and that personality, like that's a really jungle. And this stuff is brief and clean and it's distinct. You know, you're really working on very concrete things, and it's come out of DeShazer, Jeffrey DeShazer, I think it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stephen DeShazer, one of the American guy, and his wife Kim Uiberg or something. They're in America, a family therapy center. They watch thousands and thousands of hours of family therapy, and they just looked at the sections of talking that seemed to have a positive effect, that people could go away and they came back and go, I really used that. You know, we were talking about that. That really helped when I got home. I could do that.
Yeah.
And much better afterwards. Much better than what when we were going all of that other stuff. That didn't really help. That just put me in a depression, you know.
Yeah.
So they used that, and they did a lot of meta studies, and you know, a lot of it's been verified a lot, this one. But as I say, you know, sometimes they're expected to do it in 3 sessions. It's brief.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you know, it's not like, if you've got a problem, tell me about your problem. It's not, if you've got a solution. And it's like, it's a very different, like psychotherapy is like, there's the expert, you lay down, they gonna know you, you know, like, but whereas solution focused differs in certain ways. One is that the person coming in is the expert. They've got all the resources already.
Right.
Not the person sitting there listening. It's not it. And the other thing is they don't have a theory of personality, whereas Freud built one, you know, the iceberg and the id and the ego and the super ego and all the, you know, and that's what they're always like looking to confirm and check out and get you to understand, and how does it work and all that sort of stuff. There's nothing of that. It's really like, what's the solution already? Tell me. You know,
within you.
What resources have you got? Well, that's good. So let's, you know, they got things like the miracle question. You know, it's like if you went to, if you had a miracle overnight when you're asleep and you walked out in the place, what would be the first sign that the miracle had worked for what you want?
Right.
You know, like, oh, me and my husband had a hug and the child came and she was really happy. Why? Okay. You know, so it's like not 100% on the negative problem. It's focusing on always on the, you know, bad moments of behavior. But it's not always the case. You know, it's not, you know, everyone's seen, you know, Donald Trump's worst moments, but he wasn't always like that. You know, he said some good stuff, you know, or Adolf Hitler had his downsides, you know, he had his moments, but he had some good stuff. He's quite good in, you know, that no problem doesn't have solutions. And if you keep focusing on the solutions and what's working, it has a different effect than if you only keep going, oh, this house, it's so dark, it's so wet, it's broken, it's like, if you go on and on, you're not likely to keep the motivation that you need and the positivity. And that seemed to be the job of the brief, you know, the solution focused therapist, is to get the person to stop mulling around the problem and regurgitating it, and, you know, click back. So that's very different than eye movement or body based or mindfulness or psychodynamic. Very different, you know. So I think even getting aware that there are so many different ones, it's what we really need are these what they call choice agents or something. These new, what I notice of these big therapy chat groups, the online ones, not chat groups, the online counseling, is some of them have a kind of what they call a choice agent or something, or help agent, but they're the one who listen to what you're talking about and go, okay, I know the person for you, it'll be this one.
Right. Okay.
So I think it's a bit, one of the problems is it throws us to say, you know, what do you want, you know, in the world of therapy, right? Well, I don't know. It's like working in the mall, and you're like, you know, it's like, you know, you need to become a shopping assistant, you know. It's like you do need in that kind of world, and many of them, because they're making their living at this, they don't really show you anything up ahead for free, so you don't even know what you're buying. And if it's very expensive, like, you know, many of them have gone in for this very expensive per hour thing to try to make a living, then that can be very unfair, I think, on the shouldn't be any incentive for the therapist to keep someone going on and on and on and
No,
on.
no.
Yes, because it's to the advantage of the therapist, and it's not to the advantage of the other one. You know, the person coming in.
Sure.
So I think, yeah. So getting the right or mixture, you know,
Mhm.
a mixture. And I don't know what the right mixture is. Maybe it's different. It's different for everyone. Is maybe you also need a combination of things. For example, you need some psychotherapy just to present. You say, no, when I was a child, no, my dad really came in my room and he just crippled me with what he said. You know, like, yeah, maybe you've never told anyone, you know,
Yeah,
about that sort of thing. So I think
yeah,
time to time, a bit of that's good, and
sure.
then some of this solution stuff, or
Yeah.
someone who knows how to shift it to there, and then right, okay, let's not talk about the past. Let's focus on right now and da da da
Mm.
da. And then also, you can get physical reactions that are happening during this stuff. Is to do something maybe like go and get a Swedish massage or something,
Yeah.
just to do with the nerves and the muscles
Yeah.
and the systems, you know, the parasympathetic and everything
Absolutely.
systems, to sort of get them rebooted and not, you know, continuing to be, you know, uptight or re-triggering.
Like contracted muscles all the time, and then the breathing's affected, and then the way
Yeah,
the thinking is affected.
yeah. And then,
Absolutely.
and then in amongst that mindfulness part of it. But like if someone's got full-on bipolar depression or you know, clinical depression, I don't think just going and meditating and having mindfulness is the answer.
Yeah.
I really don't. And I don't think the Buddha or any really competent meditation teacher would say so. I think incompetent ones would. They would say, oh yeah, this will fix everything. I just
Yeah.
don't believe the case. It is complementary and, you know, complementary therapies and prescribing them in the right kind of way. That's rare to find, very rare to find. But I think that's what we need is access to therapies, big range of them. We
Yeah.
need guidance, people who can say, yeah, for what you're this trauma you're dealing with, that's the right one for
Yeah,
a
you might
short
start
while.
there, and then you'll develop and kind of progress into needing
Yeah.
that afterwards. Absolutely. That is
But
so
affordable.
interesting.
That's what's happening, is emerging is affordable online therapy. And then I think also, yeah, get the price down to these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise it just becomes a plaything for the rich. In the Philippines, a full body massage, and there's within where I'm living, there's 10 of
Yeah.
them. It's $10 for an hour or something.
Oh,
10 US dollars for an hour.
yes.
So everyone has them, one or two
Yeah.
a week. But you contact someone from London or America, and you say, or Australia, so you should go for a massage. Say, oh no, that's like $100.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not.
It's like a
Or I
like
spoke to someone who did the solution focus thing, and I said, so what's your rate? And it was like the equivalent of, it was 150 New Zealand dollars for an
yeah.
hour. And I was like, and I went and looked on the website that talked about the cost of living over there. And I was like, I just had a pressure washer. It lasted for 3 years, constant use. That
Yeah.
cost that. What
Yeah.
have you got that's worth that for one? I
Sure.
think
And
something ought to change where they shouldn't need to charge that much to be able to live.
mm,
And it should just be made more accessible.
mm.
Somehow that shouldn't be happening. And
Yeah.
I think this is a reflection of what's happened in the past.